about 6 months, it was like it was replaying, almost like a movie in my mind. I couldn't see it, but I could close my eyes and it was almost like I just visualized those logs, the log going over, visualized that dumpster and hitting it and what that was like. And my car, wheels were spinning afterwards.
Do you want to be part of the podcast? Go to shanesbraindomain.com and click on the Aphantasia section. There you will find a question or prompt and an opportunity to contribute your thoughts and experiences. Simply record and submit your response, and you could be featured on a future episode. Aphantasia is a condition characterized by an inability to visualize mental images in one's mind. If you have just discovered that you or someone you love has aphantasia, or if you're just fascinated by the subject in general and love learning more about it, you are in the right place. The Discovering Your Mind podcast delves into all aspects of the mind's eye, including aphantasia, hyperphantasia, and everything in between. Welcome to the Discovering Your Mind podcast, brought to you by shanesbraindomain.com. I am your host, Shane Williams, also known as Shane's Brain. And today we're talking to the one and only Kristen Erickson, who was just recently on our education episode, but I wanted to bring her back on because we have some more things to talk about, I think. So welcome, Kristen. It's good to have you.
Thank you. It's great to be here. I really enjoyed doing the panel discussion, and I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
All right, me too. So to get started, why don't you just tell us a little bit about what you do for a living?
Yeah, sure. I am a counselor educator. I work at Bellevue University, a private university in Nebraska. I teach in the master's program here. It's in clinical mental health counseling. And I've been here since 2017. Absolutely love it. Love our students. They're wonderful. I've been in the mental health field for quite some time, though.
All right. What about your hobbies and interests?
I have a wide variety of hobby and interests. One of my most recent ones that I do is curling, as in sweep with a broom on ice. Absolutely love it. The Olympic trials were here a few years back. Went to that. And then as I was walking out, I turned over. There was another ice rink and I saw all these people who were curling. And I'm like, wait, how do I do that? I want to learn. And so I saw a sign there and looked up the website, and they call them Learn to Curls. And so signed up for that and have been curling ever since. I also knit, crochet. I love that. I love to do pastel chalk drawings. I make little miniatures out of polymer clay, primarily grief and loss ones. I also love to travel, and I just love to spend time with family and friends, and love game nights. Recently, I went and threw some axes, and I'm like, oh my gosh, this is fun. I could totally picture me getting into that.
Very cool. Sounds like you dabble in a lot of different things and very unique things. I resonate with that because I'm kind of that way too. I just try everything, anything and everything, and like to dabble in a lot of different things. So very cool. All right. So before we get too much into this, I want to start with this real quick because in the education episode, you described imagery to me, what imagery means to you. I've never heard anything quite like it from someone with aphantasia. So I just want to talk a little bit more about that. I have a short little clip here of you describing it, and then I want to ask you some questions about it and see if I can't understand it a little bit better. Short clip here.
Seeing imagery is being able to close your eyes and just for a moment use your imagination to be able to visualize an image in your mind. So when they had talked about it being in your mind's eye, I'm like, oh yeah, I love that because I resonate with that. And so what's fascinating about it for me is I've always just thought of imagery and this is what I thought most people thought of imagery, is that you're just using your imagination to be able to create images in your mind of what you would see if you could see it. That's the part, because I didn't know people actually could see.
All right. So, I mean, I've talked to a lot of people, And when you were describing that, it almost sounded like someone who could visualize was describing it, right? Until the end there, where you're like, except for I don't see it, right? But you're using all the key words, imagery and imagination and seeing it and all those things. And so I just want to discuss that a little bit more. So when you say those words, like, let's start with imagination. What is imagination to you? And if you could just try and describe a little bit more about what you're experiencing.
Yeah, I think for me, imagination is very broad. And so that might be like this creative process of creating something that you might not otherwise think of. I think imagination is also something that could be related to like sounds and senses, smells, like just a wide variety of sensory experiences. So maybe even more than imagery. I guess I'd probably describe it as just a process. I don't think it's necessarily like one moment in time, but more like several different things that unfold. For me, when it comes to imagery in particular, I do think imagining things, and I think of picturing it, I think of visualizing it, I think of imagining what I could see if I could see it. It's like I can see it, I just can't see it. Like I see a black screen, but it's almost like, it's so weird to describe because it's hard for me to even put in words myself, but it's like, I see this black screen, but it's almost like I see behind the black screen, even though there's nothing there, as if I was doing all of these things. I just can't see it. I didn't know there was any other way. That, I think, is something that made it so trippy when I heard that people actually could see images in their mind, because I'm like, what? It was almost like a little bit of jealousy kind of thing, like, oh my gosh, because I love imagery and, picture a lake and picture sitting on the pier or going for a walk in the mountains or something. I just love that. I responded so well to it. It was soothing and relaxing to me. When I learned that people actually could see the image, you mean you're not using your imagination of what this could be like? It's like you actually see it. It got me thinking, how much don't I know? Like, what else don't I know?
Right. Okay. So it sounds like it's there without being there. I sometimes call it seeing without seeing.
That's a great way to describe it. And I don't know if anybody else would fully understand it unless they're kind of similar in that regard.
Right. And I like the way you talk about it kind of being behind the black screen, because I kind of say the same thing. Like, it feels like it's in the other room.
Yeah. And what's interesting about it is, like, I can think of so many experiences. Like the very first time I ever learned imagery did an imagery exercise was when I was in high school. And the gym teacher after gym class, was guiding us through a relaxation exercise where we were on the beach. And I thought, oh gosh, this is so relaxing. I love this. Like, I could feel my feet in the sand. I could see that beautiful sunset, the waves coming. I just couldn't see it, but kind of like you said, in the other room could see it.
It does sound to me like you're having kind of a more profound experience than a lot of people with aphantasia. When I have that experience of thinking on a beach, I don't really get anything out of it. I've had other people tell me that too, like, what are we doing here? Like, there's nothing, right? It sounds to me like it's a lot closer to something. For me, it's pretty close to nothing. I think that's very interesting. And one of the things that I love about talking to all the different people, because one of the hangups that I had early on was just assuming that everyone with aphantasia was like me, right? The more I've talked to everybody, I realize just how different we all are, and the experiences we're having are different. And the point of this podcast here is just try to understand it.
Well, and what I love about that is it really is something that I would hope especially in my field as a mental health counselor for years and years, I would hope that we would try to get into what somebody else's experience. Like sometimes we'll talk about, trying to put ourselves in somebody else's shoes. And, in reality, we can't really do that, but we can at least try and see what we can do to understand. Because even if you did put on somebody else's shoes, you're still going to have a different experience because they're not your shoes and they don't fit quite the same way or feel quite the same way. But yeah, anytime we can try to understand a little bit better, I think there's a lot of applications in a lot of areas of our lives, not just in, mental health.
Yeah, I agree. It affects all aspects of our lives. So many people are just stuck in I'm right and you're wrong type of thinking. And I think this topic really is a way to break out of that, because you can just look and see we're just all so beautifully unique, and we need to have, some grace and understanding in that realm.
One of the things that I love about that is sometimes there are people who feel like they're right. I have often been one of those people who have been known to say, but there are some other ways to see the same thing or view the same thing or experience the same thing. Even in counseling, there's so many ways to do counseling and be a successful counselor and helpful with clients that you're working with. And even just little things like this, like, my experience with aphantasia, learning that I have it and just how different it is, and hearing that there's so many different ways to even experience aphantasia. I hope that we're open to experiencing many different ways and viewing things different ways, because there are a lot of different ways of seeing the same thing, and it's just different. It's not a bad, it's not a good, it's just different.
Exactly. All right. So in that clip, you also mentioned the term the mind's eye, and you said that really resonated with you. But the term aphantasia literally means without a mind's eye. So I just want you to talk about that a little bit more. What does having a mind's eye mean to you? And do you feel like you have one, even though you have aphantasia?
I actually do think I resonate with that term, and I like that term because I do still feel like in my mind's eyes, I can see and experience things. It's just different than somebody else might, even if I can't see anything. Maybe it comes back to that, imagining what I could see if I could see it. To me, that's part of how I view a mind's eye. So I do think that there's lots of different ways we use words. And so it might not be the technical kind of, definition or how other people might describe it. But I do, in my mind's eye, feel like I can see something. It's just very different than what other people would see, including having aphantasia. I can experience it. I can have a physiological reaction to it. And maybe that's where that imagination piece comes into play for me. So I don't know.
No, that's good. That's good, because you hit on something that I always talk about is the words, right? Words mean something completely different to each and every one of us because of our experience. My wife has hyperphantasia, and when we talk about this, a lot of the times we're just arguing about what the words mean, right? And so I totally love that, because I don't want to get set into any box where, the mind's eye means this, and if you have aphantasia, you can't have one. I love that you're able to have your own definition for it, and that it resonates with you, it means something to you. And I think that's great. And I think it's another cool way to just highlight all of our differences, because I know a lot of people with aphantasia would say, I don't have a mind's eye. That's their experience, and you have your experience. So I think it's all.
Well, and I can picture how people would say they don't if, like what you were talking about, the beach, if, like I can still experience in my imagination those waves rolling in and the sunset and the sand on my feet, like I can still experience that. But if you don't experience that, I could see how that would be hard for some people. And I could see why they would say they don't have a mind's eye.
All right. Why don't you tell me a little bit about how you discovered that you have aphantasia, or that aphantasia exists?
A few years back, I was doing a training that was very a holistic kind of training. And one of the components of it was visualization and imagery type of exercise that is part of it. It's actually a group method. And so the one I did was imagery, and we did it with another person there. So that person walked people through the imagery exercise. I was doing another piece of it tied with imagery, but kind of explaining some of the imagery and what it is and what it isn't, that kind of thing. And when I was looking up a piece of information that I thought, oh, I'd love to share this. It was like a stat on something. And to be honest, I can't even remember what the stat was that I was looking at, but I just wanted the most updated version. And so I had gone online, just like random Google search kind of stuff. And that's when I came across Aphantasia. And I thought, oh, what's that? How come I hadn't heard of this? Especially with how much I use imagery in my work and how much I love it. And so that's when I started reading a little bit about Aphantasia. I just read the article and I'm just like, what? You mean people see things? And I'm like, no way. I just was so tripped out that for a moment I kind of forgot what I was looking up to share the next day. And I just started reading all these things going, oh my gosh, there's a lot written on this. I just remember being one floored that I didn't know this. And two, that I'm grateful that people are starting to talk about this. When I had mentioned it to the group, they didn't really seem that, I don't know, maybe it was my imagination, but it didn't seem like anybody was having quite the same experience that I was with that. Although ever since I've learned about it, I have definitely approached teaching students about it a little bit differently. That's for sure. It just floored me that people actually see things. I come from a large family. There's 8 of us kids. And so I had called on my brothers and sisters and started asking my family members what their experience was, and just some of the similarities and some of the differences. It was just fascinating.
All right. In general, when you close your eyes, what do you see?
When I close my eyes, I just see black, but I do notice when I am in a room that is light, it's not completely black. It might be some like various shades of like darker grays or something like that. If I close my eyes after being in a really bright room with bright lights, I will see some flashes of light for a moment.
All right. Can you think of nothing if you want to?
That is harder for me. I have a very active mind.
Do you feel like you have control over your thoughts?
I wouldn't say I have control over my thoughts, but I do think once a thought comes and I have some choice of what I do with that, if that makes sense.
Okay. Have you ever had moments of visualization or something outside the norm?
You know, I have had a couple experiences in the past, and they're probably normal given the situation. Definitely not normal for me. So I have severe retinal lattice degeneration, and I had an eye doctor once tell me what I need to know, like signs in case there's like a retinal detachment or something. And they said like, hey, if you see floaters or flashing lights or something like that, and you see a lot of them, definitely get in right away. About 20 years had gone by after that experience. And I remember one day starting to see these images in my eye that looked like amoebas, a whole bunch of them, like what you'd see in a microscope. This was my right eye. And it was so much so that to actually see out, like to see anything in the room, sometimes I'd kind of go like this, kind of looking around. The night before, I had some light that started at the top of my eye and it would go all the way down, whether my eye was open or closed. I didn't think too much of that. But in the morning when I saw those floaters, I remembered this conversation from the ophthalmologist. So I had called my retinal specialist and I said, hi, this is what's going on. This is Saturday. So she's like, okay, come on in. We'll take a look. So then I remember going in and she says, oh, it looks like you have a little hole in your retina. And that's probably what's causing it. And he's like, yeah, we need to do surgery right now. And so while he was doing this laser surgery, it was fascinating because I'm seeing all these like pink colors, neon purple colors. Like I'm just seeing colors visually that like you just don't see every day. And I was so fascinated by that. And I just was telling him like, oh my gosh, this is so beautiful. I said, this is amazing. That was a really cool experience. It was scary at the same time, but it was just really neat to be able to see that. There was something else that was interesting. I once was in a bizarre little car accident out in the country where I had lived at the time. And I kind of was in a bad habit of just kind of glancing over just to make sure I had everything I needed on my chair. And it was a dead end road, so nobody really was around. And so I just kind of glanced and then I'd go back. Well, I must have seen something out of like, kind of unusual out of the edge of my glasses. It felt like I was getting a little too close to the edge. And I instinctively just kind of like turned the wheel really fast. And then I remember in my head, my ex-husband, he would always say like, if you ever drive, don't jerk real fast. That's how people flip their cars. And I'm like, oh crap, I just did that. But then I was starting to go off that side of the road and I'm like, so I did it again. And I'm like, oh crap, I just did it again. And then in my mind, he said, well, gosh, if you ever feel like you're going to possibly roll the car, it'd be better if you just go directly straight off, like make it intentional. And then I remember, driving over all these logs. And then I remember the fence post that I hit in such a way that it went, and it kind of like took out my mirror. And then I remember another one that happened that went right up above. And then I remember seeing a big red dumpster and I'm like, gosh, I'm not stopping. I think I need to hit the dumpster so I'll stop, like intentionally. So I did. I hit the dumpster and stopped. For about 6 months, it was like it was replaying almost like a movie in my mind. I couldn't see it, but I could close my eyes and it was almost like I just visualized those logs, the log going over, visualize that dumpster and hitting it and what that was like. And my car, wheels were spinning afterwards. That was fascinating too, because I hadn't really had that experience of something a little bit more bordering traumatic. I mean, I was very present, but I was just intrigued that I could actually, like in the back of my mind, that my ex-husband's like, that even popped in my head what he said. Like that was like probably a year earlier and it just popped in my mind. So I was really intrigued by that. And then I was intrigued when I hit all those logs. It sounds weird, but it had kind of a musical quality to it that I was just like, wow, that's trippy. But it was almost like time slowed down. Like that whole thing that probably occurred in just like a minute or two really felt like it was this huge 10-minute kind of ordeal. But it was just so intriguing because it just felt so slow. And then again, the intriguing part afterwards of being able to like, visualize that anytime I thought of what happened, even if I couldn't see it, my version of it, but it was almost like reliving it as if I was there. Even to this day, I can still close my eyes and visualize that. I don't have the same reaction I had before. So it's behind the screen, but I can see it still to this day, all of the details.
That's very interesting. Did having aphantasia affect how you performed in school?
I could kind of visualize on the page where things were. I used a lot of color coding because the colors were something I could remember a lot easier. Anytime there was color involved. I did a lot of just straight out flat memorization. I think that probably, like in hindsight, that's probably why I did a lot of that. I don't think it really impacted the learning in the sense that I didn't really know anything different. I could picture it being way easier if I could visualize. That might have made it a little bit easier to do things. But yeah, I still found a way to still learn and, enjoyed school a lot. And I figured out a way to make it work.
Right. So we just did, a whole episode on education and talking about how we can get more people aware of it and implement it in the classroom and all those things. But just to play devil's advocate a little bit, like is it really that big of a deal, right? It's a small percentage of us that have aphantasia, and most of us are gone our whole lives without knowing it, and we got through and we made it, right? So is it really that big of a deal to the education system or people's experience in education? What do you think?
I have some mixed feelings about it because there's part of me that's like, hey, we adapt. We're pretty adaptable people overall, and we'll figure it out. But there's part of me that is like, totally makes a difference, because if we know how people learn and what they're experiencing, I think we can custom things that can help them learn even better. I personally would love to see more individualized, custom kind of ways of teaching students different things, or at least using a wide variety of things, that there's enough for everybody between it. And then also normalizing that it's okay if you learn differently, or if you see things differently, that there's nothing wrong with you. Like if you have aphantasia, there's nothing wrong with you. But I do think that if we're not careful, I think we can lose students. And your example of like, being on the beach and I just don't see anything. That's not my experience at all. You could totally lose somebody in the process if you're trying to use some imagery with them. My brother is a aerospace ABD, PhD ABD by training. And when I was asking him about, imagery and what he was experiencing, he said that he can see the images in his mind and he can manipulate them, and he can see what's in them and what's around them and underneath. And he was surprised when he talked to his, classmates, and this was college days, and he said that they could see it in 2D, but they couldn't see it in the 3D, which I thought was really interesting. And then, a couple of my other siblings, that they can visualize great, but it's almost like a movie for them. Another sibling of mine, she's like me. She's like, I just imagine in my mind, so I can kind of see it, but I don't, because it's black, but I can kind of see it, like, because that's my imagination. And then another sister of mine, she was saying, okay, I can see it, but it's in the upper part of my brain in the center. And she's like, I can see it, but I have to work really hard at it. And I have to compartmentalize and take all the other stuff in my mind away to even visualize it, but I can see it. But anyways, when I just think of all of us individually, gosh, we all learn so differently.
And that's why I think it is important in the education realm, because if a teacher now all of a sudden understands that all those students out there are having a different experience in their mind than they are, then that can affect the way they teach, right? I heard a teacher, and she said when she was teaching, reading the books and everything, she just assumed everybody out there was having the same experience as she was. And when she learned that that's not the case, some people are having movies, some people are having nothing, some people are having, just brief snapshots, some people are hearing it, some people are smelling it. Like she said, I just wish I would have known. All right. You have a lot of experience in the counseling realm. How do you think this topic of aphantasia and visualization affects counseling?
Yeah. So if we could use imagery in a way that could be soothing, that could be relaxing, that could be more centering, especially when somebody was anxious. There's been a lot of ways I have used it very, very successfully. One of the reasons why I think it's important that counselors learn about it is because I did have, because I use imagery so much, especially for self-care and wellness, kind of like skill building, because I used it so much, I did have a couple experiences where clients would come in and they'd be like, well, I don't really see images. And if that happened, sometimes we might try it out again, but most of the time we just go a different direction. But there was something else that happened a couple times early on, like back in the 90s when I was first learning all this and applying, where I kind of just went along with it anyway. And then afterwards, as we process and talk about the experience, and they're like, yeah, that just so didn't work for me. And so I'm like, okay, I got to totally change this, because I realized that there were some people that didn't work for them. When that happened, we just go a different direction with that. But it got me changing things early on. It's like, why would I wait to begin with? Wait till the end before I realize that. And so over time, what I started doing, if I used it, was to be able to ask them as we go along of what they're seeing and experiencing, because I would learn a lot that would better help me, better help them, how to adjust or not to adjust kinds of things. It also helped me with, if there's anybody who had that more hyperphantasia kind of experience, and especially if they had any PTSD kind of reactions and stuff, what we could do there to be able to help. And so I learned a lot early on, kind of the what not to do kind of thing. I would adapt it, and people were really cool and flexible about it because, as quickly as I would learn, I'd quickly adapt. But I think over time started realizing that there's some different ways to approach things.
Things are pleasant in the little town of Quiet until Mel Beezer discovers he's allergic to his own sneezes. Blending wit and humor with lively imagery, The Endless Achoo is a delightfully clever tale, available on shanesbraindomain.com and Amazon.
One of the reasons I use the lemon exercise a lot, of just, visualizing a lemon and visualizing you cutting into the lemon, seeing the lemon, squirt when you cut into it, visualize holding it up to your nose and seeing if you could smell it, and then taking a bite and seeing if you could taste it. I learned a lot from that. How detailed or not can people see or not see, if it was a direction to maybe consider using imagery or not. But there was another reason, I have to admit, why I use that, because sometimes what people would say is they would comment that when they thought about the lemon, they just tightened all their muscles and puckered up. And then sometimes when they pictured taking a bite of the lemon, they would find themselves salivating. So a lot of moisture kind of thing in the mouth. And so one of the things that I would do with that is often talk with people like, hey, there's no lemon in front of you, but you're having a physiological reaction. I wonder if we can use some more soothing images to be able to help create something different, or if there's some different things you're struggling with or wrestling with, that we can do almost like a lack of better words, like change the channel, kinds of things with some of those thought patterns and images and different things that come up. So I really actually think there's a lot of different applications in the mental health field, but the one size fits all, if there are people who are not experiencing the images or finding that distressing, or if you're totally dismissing it, I think that could be seen as a trust violation, and that you could lose your client, so to speak, of they might not buy in or want to explore some other things with you because they can be like, oh my gosh, that person doesn't even get it. And I think that if counselors aren't aware of that, very well could happen. I do think early on in the field, I probably had a couple of those times where before I realized that, wow, everybody is a little different, and I'm going to need to approach this a little bit differently with each person. So I think I learned along the way some things of the what not to do, but also the check in with clients and see what could work for them. They're the experts on them. We might be really knowledgeable about X, Y, and Z, but gosh, they know what they experience and go through. And hopefully we are tuning into that and customing every approach and intervention and being thoughtful with what we use, so we can help them have a better experience, but also in the end that we can help them move to a better place, whatever it is that they are experiencing. And some counselors don't always know how to work with clients very well with grief and loss concerns and things they're struggling with. But it is something that there are some counselors, especially who don't know anything about aphantasia, they might not know what to do with that. There's a couple of things that they might be able to do that could help to a degree, but if they don't fully understand that distressing piece of it, they could be missing out on an important connection with that person. Because if we don't tap into that, it can be hard for us to know how to help people.
It comes back to awareness, like just this simple little piece of information can just open your mind, open your world, open your ability to try and look through somebody else's experience or somebody else's eyes. That's why I really think it's so important. And it's why I, do the podcast and write the books and do the things that I do, because that just, number one, it fascinates me. But number two, I really do think it's important that people understand this and know about it. All right, let's talk about your hobbies a little bit. Do you think aphantasia plays a role in any of the things you enjoy doing? And the one that comes to my mind is chess. You said you're quite good at chess, right?
I love chess.
Yeah, I enjoy chess as well.
Awesome.
I'm just curious if you could describe what's going on in your mind when you're playing chess.
I used to be a really defensive chess player. And so that would be, how are all my pieces protected? And so it would be seeing in my mind, if I did this move, this move, this move, this move, what's the consequences of that? Or what's the consequences of that 2 or 3 moves in advance? So like something like chess, that visualizing the different moves and possible outcomes was important for me to be able to do that. I have played with some players who are way intellectual, and I think sometimes they were probably surprised that I was such a good chess player. But these are people who they could visualize 20 moves ahead. I couldn't do that. I could only do a couple moves ahead. And so I remember one time playing somebody and made a move and they said, "Oh, well, you won the game. I'm done." And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, I just played through 20 different moves after this. And in the end, you're the one who would win." And I'm just like, they said, "I'm out." And I'm just like, no way, because I couldn't do that. But they had that ability to do that. And I just was so intrigued by that.
What you just said about him playing the whole game through reminds me of a conversation I had with a friend of mine who says he does that with conversations. He'll play out the whole conversation in his head and then just skip the conversation because he already knows how it's going to end, right? And he's
Love it. Out of curiosity, how is it for you when you play?
So for me with chess, it's like this with most things with me. Like I'm a graphic designer and people ask me, how in the world do you do that if you cannot visualize? And I say, because I can see and I do it in real life, right? I don't need to do it in my mind because I'm doing it in real life. And that's how chess is with me. It's happening in front of me. It's very hands-on for me. Like as I'm talking to you, a lot of the way you talk and the way you say, if I didn't know you had aphantasia, I wouldn't think you had it. The way you express and you talk about visualization and all that, to me, it's not that way. It's very close to nothing. My dad passed away a few years ago, and I can't visualize him at all. If I don't see a picture, a physical picture, I got nothing, right? So I really do think we're having vastly different experience, even though we both have aphantasia. I can't quite put my finger on it. I mean, obviously I have thoughts in my way, but my thoughts never really seem very visual. They seem kind of distant and vague and hard to explain.
Like even just hearing you talk about your dad, like that's hard. My mom had passed away 30 years ago. It is harder for me to close my eyes and picture my mom. But if I look at a picture of her and then I close my eyes, I can do that a lot easier. What's interesting is my brother, he passed away a year and a half ago. My dad passed away 3 years ago. I can close my eyes and visualize and picture them very easily. But it's still very comforting to be able to do that. And so for people who can't see it all, like even behind a screen kind of thing, painful,
At the same time, I'm very comfortable with my aphantasia. Like I'm so used to the way I am, and I don't spend a lot of time wishing for something different. I just live in my reality. Like it works for me, right? Again, it goes back to the reality thing. Like I can't picture him in my mind, but I can look at a picture of him. So what's the difference? Like I'm good,
Yeah. Well, and also, if you don't know anything different, we kind of like figure out whatever it is that we need to do that works for us. Sometimes I wonder, like, gosh, would I want to be able to see it like everybody else does? There are some times where I would love that. And there's some times where I am like there's some real benefits to it. Like, I'm an incredibly creative person, but I think it's because you are starting from scratch. You don't have a preconceived notion of something. And if you do, you don't get stuck in it. You know what I mean? Sometimes people get stuck like that's how it should be or whatever. And so, but there are some times where I do wish. And I think especially like, with my mom and my brother and my dad, there are some times where, gosh, I wish I could close my eyes and actually see them. And in the meantime, I'm grateful that I have pictures, and I'm grateful that I can still see the pictures, and behind that little black screen can see a lot of memories and experiences, and some things that are very comforting. So I am grateful for that as well. But yeah, there are some times where I do wish that, I could see. How about for you? Do you ever wish that you could see?
I wish I could take it for a test drive and see if I like it,
That's a great way to say it. Take it for a test drive.
But at the same time, I don't know if I would still be me. You know what I mean? This is so core to who I am. Would it be a benefit or would it be a negative?
Yeah. And I don't know if we would really know. Yeah. Unless we really did have that opportunity, like, for a day or whatever kind of thing. But yeah, I think overall, gosh, there's some things along the way. Yeah, maybe it would have been nice if this isn't just happened or unfolded this way. But ultimately, in the end, it is kind of like what you're describing. Like, we are who we are, even though some of those things were really painful that I'd never wish on anybody. But I learned so much, and it really become a stronger person in so many ways. I've been able to help clients and resonate with some things I never thought I'd be able to resonate with, kind of stuff, and just meet people along the way that I've met. And it's just, I don't know. I feel the same way, like, who we are helps make us in our experiences, including the aphantasia. It contributes to who we are at the core.
Tune in next week for part 2 of an Aphantastic Hodgepodge with Kristen Erickson. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, follow, and engage with us, and share it with your friends and family as we continue to explore this fascinating subject. For additional information about this episode or Shane's Brain, check out the show notes. Thanks for listening to the Discovering Your Mind podcast. You are beautifully unique.